Hello everyone, my name is Sham Nabhan. Today I'll be talking about researching translation practice. So this chapter essentially discusses the matter of human practice in general and specifically translation practice. And also this chapter discusses methodological approaches, challenges, and opportunities related to these practices. So first of all, let's discuss from theoretical to empirical perspectives related to these practices. A great deal of practice literature focuses on what practice is from theoretical and conceptual perspectives. It is highly regarded in the academia that the abstract concept may be more essential than empirical studies of social phenomena. For example, Stadzek's scholarship is abstract and philosophical. He suggests that it is enough for a work to be concerned only with theory, although in his recent book he admitted that the adequacy of theoretical concepts has to be judged based on their usefulness in the empirical analysis. Some practice scholars focused on everyday practice, such as eating and driving. However, others have been interested in what practice theory brings to an understanding of practices in the workplace. For example, hospitals, schools, company offices, and construction sites. So the key method for studying contemporary practices are therefore observation and interviewing. In order to understand recent practices, we have to take a look at all the human practices and how they changed over time. For example, while studying the history of driving, goggles and driving gloves are among the natural traces of the past practice of driving, but they have disappeared from today's practice. Likewise, competence that was once integral to the practice of driving, for example, how to use hand signals, change oil, and read a map, have been forgotten or have evolved into operating and following a sat-nav system. Now, let's talk about ethnographic research. What do we mean by ethnographic research? So ethnographic research is described or defined as involving the creation of primary data through personal interaction with research subjects in a project of creating or refining generalizations about human social life. So those personal encounters occur naturally in social settings, and the researcher develops and applies descriptive categories to those encounters in inscriptions. Now, the types of ethnographic research. Katz identifies three types or genres of ethnographic research. The first one is iconic ethnography, the second is comparative analytical ethnography, and the third is labeled modeling ethnography. In the iconic ethnography, the researcher pays attention on a small number of individuals and situations and describes patterns of their social lives. In the second, the analytical ethnography takes specific forms of behavior rather than individuals, and it's subject of analysis. Finally, the labeled modeling ethnography, although it is not a widely used term, this type of ethnography is interested in shaping or modeling how the social world or a community or a constitution works. They produce descriptions that are more abstract than the iconic ethnography and that are much less concerned with variations than comparative ethnography. Those genres of ethnographic researches are essential in the studies of translation practices, but for addressing different aims and research questions. On one hand, a practice-based study could start to focus on a small set of translators or a particular site or a particular site of translation practice that may be considered significant in some way. On the other hand, the research may be interested in understanding how translation practices are reproduced or how they vary. Now, the methods. Ethnographic can take different methodological approaches to field work, the analysis of data, and the generation of ethnographic description. Firstly, those who follow theory ethnography are encouraged to enter the field without any preconceptions, to create field notes, and to winnow through them to identify patterns. Burawoy, IPID, argues that this is a research based on the positive science principles of attempting to achieve reliability in gathering and analyzing data systematically, replication in deriving categories from data, and representativeness in sampling and comparisons. Secondly, those pursuing the extended case method are guided into their analysis by existing theories. This method is emerged from the Manchester School of Social Anthropology in the 1950s and 1960s. Here, however, researchers operate according to the principles of reflexive science, aiming at the continual improvement of existing theories. Now let's talk about challenges. Practicalities of conducting research in workplaces can present several challenges. The first one, the choice of site and the determination of relevant selection criteria. The second is gaining access to the field. Last but not least, the opportunities of practices. Firstly, the study of the situated accomplishment of practice, focusing on specific sites where those practices are performed and reproduced. The second, this approach is genealogical one, where the focus is on the life of the practice. Third, this approach is configurational, focusing on how practices are interconnected and transsituated. The fourth, the dialectical approach, it focuses on the tensions, contradictions, and power imbalances that keep practice in flux. Here I offer suggestions for research projects that are conceptually informed by practice theory and that set out to investigate current and past translation practices empirically. The first approach, this situational approach, encourages or addresses research questions that relate directly to actions that can be observed in real-time performance or the practice. The second one studies how a practice emerges from and is constituted by meanings, materials, and competences. Also, this research draws on historical sources and methods, as mentioned earlier. The last one, or the third one, this approach to translation would examine what other practices are related to the practice of translating and characterize the nature of the relationship. The fourth and the final, this suggestion focuses on the effects that are produced by practices and their associations, for example, issues of power. Thank you for listening, and that's it.